This is The Pillars, the Porch, and the Path, the podcast that invites you to join two Mississippi mystics and real-life sisters as we build the pillars of our craft and share all of the ways we use our intuitive gifts and spiritual tools to live an intentioned, spiritual life full of abundance, prosperity, laughter, and fulfillment. It does not matter your lineage or magical tradition. We know how lonely it is out there for new mystics, witches, and hoodoos. So just know this. You are welcome and wanted here in this magical and charmed corner of Beyonce's internet. If you are ready to create a holistic and modern spiritual lifestyle that respects your uniqueness and embraces eclecticism, you are in the right place. And hey, we made it, witches. Spring has sprung, and while some of you may still be knee-high in snow and mud, the wheel of the year has turned, and it's time to pay homage and attention to our springtime magic. So in this week's episode, we deep dive into spring correspondences, including your must-have crystals, botanicals, and go-to tarot cards and affirmations. And as I get ready to let this new episode bloom and unfurl, I have to admit, we're pretty good. We just do not miss. Per usual, this episode has it all. Tarot spells, the emperor, garden witchery. Oh my. Brew yourself a cup of tea, light those Tallulah oak candles, and get ready for the sweet, magic, and uplifted episode of The Pillars, the Porch, and the Path.
Hello, everybody. For us, it is morning time. So good morning. Welcome to The Pillars, the Porch, and the Path. This is a special episode. This was a request episode from one of my favorite people. She requested an episode on Wheel of the Year springtime because she loved Wheel of the Year autumn so much. She wanted us to do a bit of a breakdown on the Wheel of the Year. Y'all know this is a time for new beginnings. We've already had the spring equinox. We're in Aries season. That is the beginning of the astrological new year, which as far as I'm concerned is the new year. Aries season is from March 21st to April 20th. And so we're going to be talking all about that, about spring, the coming of spring, what that means for you, your rituals, your practices. How are you feeling? You should be feeling something. And, we've got some themes, being genuine, our authentic selves, dynamism. How do we approach things with newness, courage, some ferocity, excitement? How do we become our own fire starters as we cruise into spring and Aries season? And we are ready to get into it and talk about it with you. What are your new beginnings, your projects, your art, books? What are you writing? What are your spells? How are you using this spring energy to get things going? For me right now, the beginning of spring means the end of the rainy season. Y'all know our winter, it starts raining around October, and that's really as much as we get in Northern California from December through March. I always know when spring is on its way for lots of different reasons, but it's the beginning of Little League season. And I know when we see the Little League parade, that means it's the end of spring. So many things are evergreen here in Cali, and we haven't had tons of rain. So I feel as though my spring got started a month ago, but I gave myself time. Just give yourself time till Aries season. I'm also living in a house with two girls that are starting to explore love and romance. So things are interesting around here. Everything feels really pink and glittery and rosy. And I am psyched to get into my garden, but I've got a lot of new things I want to get started. A lot of them have to do with the tarot. I'll get into that later. But Andy, come on in. How's your spring feeling? Like, you're in Texas. It seems like to me right now in Texas, like, I don't know what y'all may get with spring, but how are you feeling? What are you doing? How's it feeling coming into spring?
Well, I think of the coming of spring a little differently. I get super excited because I have seasonal affect disorder. I don't like, winter. I understand it a little better in my spirituality. I'm growing to understand kind of why the earth needs winter. And I definitely had a better perspective on winter, but I'm an outdoor girl. So, and I'm a sunshine girl. So the coming of spring for me is super exciting. But as a gardener, when you talk about like, when is it becoming spring? It's so funny. I was thinking about it this week. We kind of have all these artificial kind of guideposts, right? Like March 21st is the first day of spring and the spring equinox. And then, you have your last frost date. And when is it actually going to start snowing? And like, depending on whether, you're an East Coast witch or a West Coast witch or down south, like all that can mean something different to you, right? So I'm kind of glad we're talking about it today from like a spiritual sense, from like a practical gardening sense, from like a spiritualist sense, because it's a lot of different things. So I think where I used to be excited about spring for, we get to be outside. Of course, we're starting to grow things. I'm now starting to appreciate. We kind of jump over spring a little bit to like, ooh, summer's almost here, time to be ourselves. But there really is an awakening process that comes that is happening, right? There's imagine your best sleepiest morning, right? Like you're not waking up to rush, you're not going to work. You actually get to just like lay in your bed, open your eyes, take a deep breath and be like, damn, what am I going to do today? Usually for a lot of us, it's Sunday that feels really delicious and just kind of, I get to choose what I get to do today. That's how I've started to think about spring as less of a time of like jumping into the hot girl stuff because that kind of skips over, right? We talked about this with autumn. Sometimes we kind of skip over spring. I really want to try to focus and be more present this season on feeling the awakening. I'm starting to look at the plants a little bit differently. As a gardener, I would be like in my garage, before when I was like a super, just gardening was all I did. Before I was running a business and doing a lot of different things, I would be planting seeds and watching seedlings grow through the winter. So, you're gangbuster to get to work. I'm trying to have a different attitude to where I'm trying to make the work less frenzied so I can actually take part in the magic of putting a seed in the ground. One of Cameron's friends were over and his mom doesn't grow as much stuff as I do. So we were putting out sunflower seeds. And that's one thing I miss about working at the YQ. Like the fascination kids have with, I'm going to put this little bitty thing in the ground and I'm going to take care of it and love it and nurture it. And it's going to turn into this beautiful thing. And you kind of, you a lot of times we think about the finished product in our society. I hate to say it. We live in a Amazon / 24-hour like insta society. It's that process, right? Of the putting something in the ground, setting your intentions about what you want it to be, and then to start to plan your life around this coming thing. That's the part of spring that I think I want to slow down a little bit and be more present in. So like, yeah, we're doing a lot of work. Like right now, Halikey's watching me pull like couch cushion covers off and, we're refreshing the yard. But part of it is how are we preparing our family to appreciate the rest that the earth needed? How do we want to, I was really intentional growing up about how I wanted to wake my kids up. Because a lot of us, if we've grown up with a little bit of childhood trauma, like how you wake up is super important, right? Alec, you remember those? You remember those mornings you wake up like, what the fuck?
Sometimes people would literally kick open the door to wake us up, depending on like, yep.
Depending on the mood, right? And as a mom, I have been there too. Like, don't get me wrong, witches, to make it seem like we're perfect. I just explained to my sister as a Scorpio, sometimes I wake up and it's like my mind has been mad all morning. And when my consciousness wakes up, my mind goes, oh yeah, and another thing, I don't like him. I don't like him. I don't like him. And I have to explain to my husband. That's why sometimes just in the morning, I just need to meditate. I need the porch. I need some time because we all wake up differently. And so I'm trying to really kind of get into spring and appreciate how different plants are waking up, right? How people are coming out. Girl, we were at the garden store yesterday. And me and Courtney were just laughing. Ooh, they out here. Look at them. They buying all the things. Ain't none of that gonna grow in their yard, but they buying them. They out here. They touching the stuff. So, it's also just a great time to watch the collective, right, in your community get ready for this awakening. So that's where I am personally. Your sisters try not to get into the frenzy because I love this part of the year. But at the same time, I'm trying to be more present and be more focused on what is the wheel of the year, not just what is it giving me, but what is it teaching me, right? Anyway, we can get into it when we get to the gardening section, but there's a lot to learn. But you got to pause and be present sometimes to kind of appreciate these things that we turn into tasks.
That's brilliant. I'm going to make sure I mark this segment. We all wake up differently. And I just, sister to sister, I want to let you know, when you told me that last week, like sometimes you just wake up, like it gave me this entirely new perspective on, we talked about this before, how I wake up, good morning, like, good morning.
Yeah. Everybody ain't built that way, guys.
And I was actually trying to make a meme too, like how Andy and I like feel when somebody is already pissed off our Scorpio children. Like we come in like, what did y'all do? Like what did
y'all don't want this smoke?
Y'all don't want these problems with these Scorpios. Like approach them carefully. In the morning, girl, I love that you said that. And I was noticing that too. Hallie wanted to go get breakfast yesterday, and I was noticing my little town. And so I have a really homogenous little town. But I was noticing, I'm like, oh, look at all the folks. Look at all the folks in my town. They out here with the dogs and the mountain bikes and the babies and having brunch outside, and everybody's ready to get out and get into it. And one of the things I wanted to talk about was, y'all know how so many things for me, it begins and it ends with tarot. This is a wonderful time for readings. Y'all know I really do consider this the beginning of the year. This is the beginning of the astrological new year, almost for all cultures, wherever it is you come from. Before January 1st was pressed on us by the Roman Empire and Christianity, spring was the beginning of the new year. So it's a wonderful time for readings. If you're the kind of person that likes to get, readings for special things like holidays, your birthday, spring is a wonderful time. This is a great time for us to do something like, if you've got a business or project you'd like to get off the ground, or for yourself, or you're just getting started on a spiritual path, this is a wonderful time for readings. We can cast the wheel of the year. What's your archetype? There's some important lunations that are going on, like with the moon. So if you're just getting into moon cycles, I just want to remind you, we got some good stuff coming up with moon phases. There's a new moon in Aries. It's going to be on March 31st. This is where we get into taking action on things like new beginnings. And we've also got like a full moon on April 16th. And full moons, that's where we do like release and cleansing. And this is in the sign of Libra. Lord knows, like Andy and I are surrounded by Libras. So this is about looking for balance, love, those things that are Venusian, beauty and pleasure. And what do we let go of and release so that we can experience those things? And with our tarot energy for this spring, let's just jump into it. Major Arcana. Let's jump into it. Like the card for this, and I'm not pulling this randomly. This is for me, the card, I mean, not just for me, but for tarotologists everywhere. And therefore for spring is the Emperor, card number 4. This is about systems, structure, creating those things and starting those things out of love. I like to think of the Emperor and the Empress sitting side by side. I believe we talked last week or the week before about the Empress and about wild, kind of unleashed, unfurled creativity, the world providing, and the planet, Mother Nature, Gaia, providing everything that we need. It flourishes, it's organic growth and creativity. The Emperor sits beside her, and the way he rules and the way he creates is a little bit different. A lot of time we think of the Emperor as the divine masculine, sitting on a really hard throne. It's festooned with images of Aries, the ram, 2 ram's heads. The Emperor sits ready for battle. He's in armor, covered over with a red cloak, which means courage and action and passion. The image is that of kind of an older person, like with a beard. That means they have age and experience, and they're ready to start. They're ready to build, especially systems. And so I'm thinking about that a lot. And if we were going to, choose a card from the Minor Arcana, which is a little bit more about like people and places, a good girlfriend of mine doing her research, this is Kirsten from the Scarlet Sage and the Land of Verse, chose the Queen of Wands. That's one of my favorite cards. And that's about activating, but in a different way. It's about activating your charm, your magnetism, creativity, artistry, reconnecting with community. It reminds me, I decided, I was like, you know what? I feel like being more normal. I'm going to a girlfriend's house. I'm going to go downtown and pick up a flower. When I pick up the flower, I start talking to the new gentleman that just opened a new beautiful flower shop. And then I see my girl Hillary that's over at the beauty shop, and we talk about, girl, there's a new Black librarian. I'm going to have an open house. I want you and I want you and everybody to come over. So, and that to me felt like I was really embodying Queen of Wands, getting back in touch with my community, getting back in touch, doing more normal things like going to concerts or going to, the school fundraiser, however much I complain about that. There's a part of me as a Queen of Wands that wants to do that. So those are our 2 tarot energies, the Emperor, systems, being the fire starter, getting ready for the new year, and the Queen of Wands, getting ready to re-engage with your community, your art, your creativity, your artistry. Andy was already ahead of the curve on that. Y'all know we went to the big gym show. Andy's doing a lot of creativity. I think she's got a lot of jewelry coming out, especially some of her beautiful malas. I can't wait for her to tell us a little bit about that. And you know that I am refreshing my calendar and ready for y'all to get in to do these readings. So that is our tarot opener. How does some of those themes sound to you, Andy? The Emperor and the Queen of Wands, systems and reconnecting with our community. What do you think?
Well, I don't like systems. I'm tired of systems now. I'm joking. When I think of systems,
Girl.
I think of work. Well, I'll be honest. I'll be the normal person who thinks about systems and processes. But it's funny that you say that because it works. I am a systems and processes girl, because I think that when you talk about the wheel of the year, or part of that natural part of that process is right. We just went through autumn. We went through winter, the earth is sleeping. We're talking about gratitude, making it through the winter, the light at the end of the tunnel, right? That kind of work, building, hibernating, really doing some inner self reflection because you're indoors, your things are internal. But now, as you're turning to spring, the shift is a little different. And the reason why processes are so important because as the wheel is turning, when if you looked at us as an agrarian society, right, like as a society that first started our existence working and planting and tilling the soil, when you think about processes and planning and you talk about the spring of the year where you're usually doing this calculation, right? This is what my yield was last year. This is what I grew. This is what I harvested, what I really needed. This is what I now know I need, right? Like for me, hyssop got put in a container because it grows a lot. I took it out of my wild bed because I know how much I'm going to get. But other herbs I knew I did not have enough of, right? So how am I going to calculate and readjust to be ready? So I think there's a natural part of that, with all of us being in nature based kind of spaces, that it's the process part of that is important because we're really looking at what has happened, what we learned about last year's harvest, and we're getting ready to apply that to our new one. The energy that kind of I think I most pull on from just, because I feel a lot of my indigenous ancestry when we're talking about working with the earth is the intention setting around that as well too, right? So we know how we're adjusting in the science of adjusting our needs to fit what our realities are, but also we're thinking about what is it that we want to gain from the things that we're putting in the ground, right? I just got some new valerian. As I'm planting and preparing the soil and putting back nutrients that the soil needs, I'm also listening. I'm also thinking about my intentions. What do I want this valerian to do for me and my clients? How do I want it to serve me in my tea? What do the roots need to grow, right? How do I start this relationship with my plants? How are they going to communicate to me what they need to grow? Is this the right place for them? Are they getting the right amount of sun? Is this going to be the place where, as a new herb, I'm going to give it the same attention as I would, some of the medicines that I know that I already have a relationship with? All of those things kind of matter as you're planning and laying out your garden. So that was one thing I was really glad that I learned is, doing some formal training around master gardening is your garden plan is super important. It's not just putting things in the ground when it's time for them to grow. It's also about planning out how you want those things to grow and how you're going to use those things that you grow, right? Is what you're putting into the ground the right yield for your family, right? Because I remember when I first started growing, I was just growing stuff because I could. I'm going to start 500 plants in my garage because I can. And my husband's sitting there going, why are you doing this? Are you giving this to people? Like, are you sharing this with other gardens? Like, what the hell? This is crazy. Stop, Lola. This is crazy. And then it got to the point where I was like, well, that was really a greedy use of resources, right? And it wasn't my best use of resources. So like I resituated my planning around the garden, right? And so you're also looking at things of that nature too, because as the soil is waking up and you're adding more things to it, every year, like I'm still using the soil from the year before. So that's kind of the energies I think about kind of with the wheel of the year and that kind of thing and waking up and how I feel about getting back into the yard. The super important thing I will tell you kind of about approaching, because I always think of, I'm in the yard right now, as you can hear the birds and stuff circling around, and I'm working on putting my garden back in. And we've invited some family that are coming soon to enjoy the space with us, is also thinking about whatever you're laying your intentions are for the year, right? Whatever you're putting into the ground, also think about the peace of mind and what it's going to take for you to be able to maintain it. Because I think that's always important too. Because what HALICUE'S saying, we get real excited, right? Like we talk about me going to Tucson and getting all those materials to make all these things. I don't have to rush to use all those materials that I stored over the winter right now, right? That's something that I gathered and stored to use and measure out over the course of the year. So I think it's also a good time for us to, as we're putting things into the ground and we're waiting for things to come to fruition, is to really thinking about, even though we feel the urge and the desire to do all of these things because we've been closed up, sometimes we have to give ourselves a little pause and to say, but let me be really planful about how I want to use these things. Because you don't want to spend up all your energy in the spring part of things, and then you've created something that you can't even enjoy because you have to put all this labor into it, right? that you didn't foresee or you didn't plan on for later.
Andy is our master gardener. I always say that she got that direct mitochondrial DNA dump from Grandma HALICUE. Andy's a green witch. She's a master herbalist. And Andy, I'm curious for you. Like, I'm a beginning herbalism student. And I love learning, like taking it all the way back to elementary school and learning about the life cycle of the plants. Because I think if we connect, if you have no idea where to start, if you're a new practitioner of any spirituality or any elemental or new age or any kind of like spirituality or religion, it's always good to start with just the basic life cycle of Earth. What is going on right now? Like, what's going on in the seasons? Can you talk to us a little bit about what is going on in the life cycle of plants right now and how that relates to how we can get ourselves steady, grounded, situated, and ready to wake up? Because you said earlier, like, everybody wakes up differently. How is what's going on in the natural world right now something we can look to give us an idea of how we can gently begin to wake ourselves
I
up?
will tell you this. When you were working with plants and someone taught me this, and when they first said it, I was like, oh, this is going to be like AA. Y'all are going to tell me shit that I should know that's common sense over and over again, and I'm going to write it down. But this is kind of what this is going to feel like. Plants are living things. Do to them what you would like to be done to you. And generally, to start, as a rule of thumb, you're going to be good to go. If you go to any dormant thing, right? So look around you. If you live in a place with like a lot of grasses or trees, right? You may see a bud or two or green leaves starting to come back. If you live in a grassy area, usually what you're going to see come back first are the weeds. They're going to pop up green. And then, then the grass will slowly start coming back. Things have been dormant. It's like they turn their on switch to off during the winter. So a plant is basically gathering resources, gathering nutrients. It's kind of just not being. It's hibernating, just like a bear does during the winter, because it has to conserve its energy so it doesn't have to fight the elements, right? That outdoor elements in winter are kind of usually unwinnable. So with spring, a plant basically is turning that switch back on. It's not like your light switch in your house, though. It's not like you switch it to on and the lights glow. Like, that's what we know as modern Americans. If you go back and look at an old Edison light bulb, like an old Edison, go just Google YouTube Edison light bulb and look at an old film reel. When you actually turn on electricity, there's a process. The filament will begin to glow. The electricity fills up in that filament. It goes through the little spinning thing to the other side, and then light happens. It's a slow warming, right? So even though the process seems really quick in spring, it's not. Plants sense January as the core temperature of the earth slowly warms up. Plants are doing what they need to do internally to wake up. So if you ever go look at a peach tree or like an oak tree, the outside may be dead, but if you scrape, don't do this to a tree. If you scrape 2 inches into its skin, it's living, right? It's just the bark on the outside, right? That looks like it's dead. So it's actually regenerating and beginning to power. And that's when you see like trees starting to bud. If you go to all your dry plants and like chop them flat, you'll usually see little green places looking for sunlight. In gardening, that's why our last frost date is so important in spring, because that's supposed to, I mean, this is according to weather, which is nature, which it can be somewhat unpredictable. But your last frost date is usually going to be the last time that the ground is actually going to freeze in whatever area that you live in. So for us, this year was a lot later. Usually people are putting stuff in, and this usually blows people's mind. In a normal gardening season, like if we were back in olden little house on the prairie days, we would be laying our gardens in mid-February, right? Global warming and a lot of things are changing how the earth reacts. Like our spring is kind of pushing back further and further, which is another reason to be conscious and earth conscious about how we as humans are impacting the earth, because we're changing these growth cycles, right? So now that your last frost is here in your area, the ground actually core temperature is now warming up and is steadily going to warm up all the way through spring. And so that's what triggers to a plant, just like hormones, to wake up. So you as a person, the same thing is happening inside of your body. That thing that Hallie's doing, where she's smelling the hormone, she's waking up. Where her skin is out, so now boys are waking up. That's a part of Hallie keeps laughing, but that's exactly what happened. That we feel.
Girl, I have to say this. As she went out to a party, she kind of came down. Me and Josh were watching TV, and I know what the outfit was that she had on, but she had the jacket strategically placed. Like, that it was not to arouse her father's curiosity as to
Well, now she got that from her mama. You done been drugged from the schoolhouse many a day for rolling up your skirt. So
but
why you talking?
when she left, I sent her a text. I was like, excellent use of puffy jacket. I was like, you did that. You did, you did it in a real subtle way because I know what top you had on. Well done. Go out there, young queen. Go get him.
Right. So the same process is happening in plants is also happening in people. Right. So get your birth control right. Get your get your plans right. Because just know, like, oh, winter, I was kind of just chilling. You'll notice all of my babies are spring babies for a reason. 90% of the time it's because I didn't have a plan. I, I have I had those early winter and spring babies. You can tell exactly how mine are timed. So I'm telling you a lesson that I've learned from experience. Halligan's about to die laughing because it's true. I will say at least one of our three was playing. So I also got that check mark too. But the first two were definitely spring babies. So just know that that's what's happening. Get your birth control right from a human perspective. Out here in the garden, we are capitalizing on that. So as flowers are blooming, you're going to start noticing pollinators are coming back to your yard. So the bees are coming back, the flies are coming back, the mosquitoes are coming back. All of those things are necessary and needed because they're the people, those are the little busy ecosystems that are carrying pollen from flower to flower. So because you have to think about it, spring. Let me give you some great imagery from a great show. If you watch Motherland, right, and they talk about Beltane, basically it's like a big orgy. Everybody goes out into the woods and they get naked and they're having sex, right? Because you're celebrating spring at the beginning of the year. So your plant cycles are doing the same thing. Flowers are to attract pollinators that take pollen to other parts of the plants and fertilize the plants, and that's what makes fruit. So that is also happening. So you're going to see a lot more colors, right? Things get more colorful. Does all this sound familiar with people too, right? You'll see plants bloom. You'll see flowers start to bloom because that's another way that the earth communicates through color, right? In biology that, hey, I'm ready to mate, I'm available, and I'm ready to start the life cycle.
Do you remember Lovecraft? Because we're using some pop culture references. And when you said that, that was one of the things I knew I was going to love about that show when they showed Beltane and they showed the like young men and young women, like how natural it was that, sacred masculine, divine feminine, how natural and normal it was for us to want to be in space with each other. And
the young men weren't just there. Let's be real with it. They busted the young men specifically for the purpose
of Beltane.
Of Beltane.
and forgetting into it.
That's how, well, and I say that because it was an important part. They were teaching this lesson in the episode to young witches about power building, that reproductive cycle. And what we're learning as women in the power of our divine feminine is that spreading of color, right? That activation of the spring cycle is also a part of our divine feminine power. And we need that joining up together. It's a catalyst. It's the nature of life, and it's very powerful. So also as the witches are walking around, they're also going like, oh, remember my Beltane when blah, 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 blah. It was a part of their rite of passage too, and of how they regenerated their power for their work.
And it's totally natural, but there's also part of the natural world, and especially as we're reemerging, we're waking up right now. I think there's a little bit of violence to that too. Like I can't help but think about like butterflies, like coming out of the chrysalis and Lovecraft Country. Remember that amazing spell where she would, she would go through her own, one of the main characters. I'm trying to think of her name. I think her name was Ruby, and she would metamorphosize. Is that the, or metamorph? I'm not sure what the actual verb is, and how it was just, I love the way they showed the violence of it, how turning into something new, blossoming, emerging can sometimes be and feel a little violent. And so I've been kind of talking about it as the violence of spring and kind of prepare for that. That's a part of the beauty too. Do you have any perspective on that or feeling about that as someone that's deeply connected to the earth and in plant spirit right now?
When we first went remote, we found some cocoons in your rue. If you plant rue in your garden, here's a garden tip. Rue attracts caterpillars. It's bitter. You all know this. It's a really bitter herb. It's also an abortive, so be careful with it. It will cause your uterine to contract. But it's a very bitter herb. So caterpillars eat it, so they are less attractive to birds because birds eat caterpillars and like, they're bitter and they prefer not to eat them. So a lot of monarch butterfly caterpillars will eat those. So we grow them to keep to kind of keep the worms on them versus like our zucchini and things. But it also helps grow monarchs And so we live in Texas and we're along the monarch trail. So we try to help support the monarch life cycle because they are also great pollinators here. And Halleck talks about that violence. And I tell two stories. We found a cocoon, we put it in a jar. So we were able to actually watch a butterfly grow. And so we kept it in this jar forever. And I'm going to be honest with you, I thought the thing was dead. We put a lid on it so it was getting no air. So I was pretty sure like we had killed this cocoon, but I just planned to kind of like throw it out before camera could just be like, oh, butterflies are here. The thing was not dead. It was fine. It erupted out. And Courtney goes, I think y'all need to go check on your mason jar one day when we came outside. And the butterfly was it was beautiful. It wasn't a monarch, but it was a black swallowtail butterfly. And it was trapped in this jar. So it's huge, beautiful, all black except for these tips of its wings. So we had to take off the screw part of the lid, right? We worked it out and finally kind of shook it enough where we could let it loose without damaging its wings. And it stayed in our garden for a while before it flew off. But when it came out of its cocoon, it was bleeding. And that was one of the things that was funny. I saw this meme from a kindergarten teacher that was like, no, someone should have told me this before I put this cocoon in a jar in front of my class because all the kids freaked out when the butterfly came out. But it is growing in a living thing. So when it busts out of that living thing, that living thing then dies and is cast away. So that's one of our lessons about spring too. As you are transforming, change and transformation can be violent. It can have a lot of emotion to it. It can be painful. But at the same time, the shedding of skin, if you will, like, when you think about the spirit of Damballa, right, that we say connects the whole world if you practice voodoo, the constant shedding of a snake, right, is a part of its growth cycle. A snake sheds a skin because it's growing. And that's what I tell people. You have to go through that violence and that shedding because if you're not growing, right? If we never go through the pain, we never go through the transformation, if we never scratch that scale off. Look at a chicken break out of an eggshell, right? A chicken is born with a little egg tooth on its beak that literally it breaks off with the violence of getting out of the shell. The mom didn't help it get out of the shell. It can't because that's what strengthens the chick to be able to live in the outside world. Our world is full of those stories, right? And it's going to be the same too with us and our transformation into spring. That's why I tell people, don't be out here listening to folks. I used to work for a gym. Don't be out here listening to folks telling you in January, you got to be ready for spring. Start killing yourself in January so you can step out in a bathing suit in spring. It is a transformation. Guess what? The boy's going to sniff you out regardless. That's biology. That's what I tell women. Like this run to get the men to sniff you out, that's biology. It's going to happen in spring. Just like bees are going to look for flowers, just like, plants are going to grow towards the sun. You don't have to chase it, girls. Like that's what the witches know. All you have to do is just wear the appropriate length clothing for the temperature and the men will come. They will come. I love this meme. They have all these TikToks of women trying to seduce their husbands in moo-moos, and this guy does a stitch and goes, am I the only one? I don't give a goddamn if you're wearing socks, a garbage bag, a potato sack. If you gonna give me some, it don't matter what you dress it up in. I'm here for the burrito, not the tortilla. Like it was so funny the way he was talking about it. And that's kind of the idea that my husband has always tried to get me to understand as a female. It's like, girl, I understand this wonderful dance you're doing, but it's the dance is for us.
Just get over here.
What I'm telling you is the dance is for you. We are the cerebral part of the relationship that need the dance and the illusion and not even the illusion, but like we need to do the seduction. We're the ones that usually draw from that. So I tell my husband, like, if that's the dance I need to do for you, then as women, I think we put so much of our focus on trying to start this catalyst. The catalyst is going to happen. Nature has built the catalyst into it. Look all around you. You hear the birds chirping, calling for a mate. You hear the flowers out there seeking bees. That's going to happen. But if you work on cultivating the inside you and preparing yourself for transformation, that's what I tell the sisters you need to worry about. Stop worrying about your cellulite lines. Worry about what's going to happen when Mr. Right gets to your house. Like y'all spent so much time getting ready for hot girl summer that you weren't planning for if you do go through this transformation, right? What are you looking for? What are you seeking to find in these relationships, right? If it is just fun and hot girl summer and that, intention that, grow that, but be clear about that. So that's what I kind of say is about the ground. And I jumped all the way right into people. Now, as far as nature and preparing yourself for that show and getting the ground ready, I personally myself have tried to Me and my husband are married. We have a great balance. I always, because when you learn about yourself, I'm the visionary. I lay out an amazing garden. My husband's like, if I had to be responsible for keeping it alive, because watering is boring. It's not exciting. So he is my waterer, but
it's not the fun part.
But I have found a match in that in just about everything in life. Me and Courtney are very much like that. I draw all my excitement and drama from the creation process, from the building, from the doing the artistic part. And he is the steady gardener. He is the constant gardener. I love that term. He is the constant gardener that's there watering, tending, keeping this beautiful thing his wife created going. But he has to remember, just like he used to edit me all the time with plants and don't try that, it's going to die. He used to say, I used to be so worried with you because you get attached and I just knew that was going to die. But what I tell him sometimes, that's a part of the artistic process. I need that. I need to try something. I need to try it. It may fail. I might have to do it again differently next season, but I need that. That's part of my artist process. And so that's the part he's learned about me. With me, I've learned for him that the way he hooks up his hoses, I will sit there and go, oh, you can make that automated. Why are you hand watering? And he just gives me this look like, because that allows me to stay away from y'all for 15 minutes at the end of the day. That's not really what he means, but that's his piece. At the end of the day, it's standing out there with the water hose with the other dad.
Yeah, like their own community.
Surveying, watering the lawn.
Providing what they need to provide to balance this whole thing out. Like, you're the creative, you plant the seed, and he's nurturing and delivering mother water.
And you get to the point where like now I'm growing the way that supports not just my needs, but his needs as well too. Like, am I planting stuff that's going to be easy to water? Is he involved in the planting process, right? We're putting things into the ground together so that the things we're growing around our home, we're kind of the same accord on. So it's also a great way, say you're not out there, looking for a relationship. Say you're already in a relationship. Say it's your relationships with your kids that you are tending or starting anew. Think of that with your kids. A lot of the conversations that I'm having with my boys are around, this is a hard part for them, especially with boys. If you have young boys, like this time where the weather gets better, they're looking outside, everything's sunshiny. It's easier to focus and stay in your classroom when it looks like crap outside. I was this kid. When it starts looking like spring outside, it is hard. And boys, I'm learning it. This is females, attention span. Girls, we all know out here, like, we're the divine being. I hope this is not a secret. For my male listeners, I love y'all. Y'all just fit the picture a different way. But as far as like control and being able to focus, women just have a lot more of that, right? And being able to, so school settings are already a little bit of a challenge for boys, but then you make it nice outside when they should be tumbling, grabbing, trying to kill each other and jumping off of things, it gets doubly hard. So I start focusing a lot of my work for my boys during spring around, let's go back to our school goals so we can finish well, because guess what's coming? Summer. I try to keep a slow build. Don't tell him, like, because my 7-year-old, if you just say summer, he thinks it's happening next week. So you have to do this by age appropriation, right? I do it differently for my 13-year-old than I do it for my 7-year-old, right? But it's more about calm and steady wins the race, right? But you're gonna have to fertilize more, just like you do outside. You have to fertilize these kids more in the spring because it's getting tough. It is tough to stay in a seat when it looks like a party outside all the time and it's sunshiny and bright. So a lot of my work and my skull candle work, I did a skull candle at the beginning of the year that is doing amazing results for them. And we burn it. I actually save the wax all year and we burn it at the end of the summer. So we'll be doing that in a couple of months because it has our petitions and all that stuff in it. So once our petitions are realized, we're going to release it to the universe. And so one thing I've done for them is I've created some amulets for them. Andrew's been wearing like some citrine around his neck. Tiger's eye is great for this, for confidence and focus. Fluorite, we got new malas that are out. Fluorite is great for grounding and calm and refocusing and recentering. I'm wearing that mala myself because it's hard for me to work remotely when the world looks so nice outside, right? Especially when I have to work remotely, like my garden's right there. My garden's right there, y'all. And I'm having to focus on work. These other people's work when my garden is right outside, right? It's getting thick for all of us. So focus, tiger's eye. The fluorite mala is one thing I'm wearing. It's new in our shop. So it comes from an amazing Tibetan supplier that I only run into in Arizona. She's an amazing lady. I want to add singing bowls and some more jewelry directly from her. So we curated that and we she's an amazing mala maker. So look at those malas online. They're hand knotted, which if you know anything about jewelry making, these are spiritually blessed and hand knotted. And so her grandfather, Halleck, you didn't know this. I've talked to her since then. Her grandfather's a monk. He's a Tibetan monk. So they actually are connected to a monastery that makes those malas. So super amazing.
Isn't that beautiful? Yeah. That big, gigantic. We didn't find. I basically led us past it, and you had to go back to it and find it. It was that big, gorgeous place.
I'm gonna stop being so mean about that lady who was kind of that nice to us, because these are her grandfathers. Like her grandfather's monastery makes these malas. Yeah. So she is not playing about pricing. She got upset with me for haggling, and now I understand why, because this is her grandfather's handicraft. But they're amazingly handcrafted malas, and that's the kind of jewelry I curate. If I'm not hand making it for you, I want you to know where it's coming from and who's crafting it. And these are amazing gemstones. But it's great to focus on, ending our goals well, refocusing our intentions on how we want to end the year, and kind of keeping them centered. The candle that I'm burning a lot of for me now that we're going into spring, a lot of people do a lot of love work and kind of like relationship work in February. I do a lot of my relationship and kind of love work going into March and spring, because I feel like it better coincides. Like that February Valentine's Day stuff, I hope y'all know that somebody in Hallmark designated February 14th as Valentine's Day. That's consumerism. Just so you know, your love work needs to be starting now. This is the optimal time to start your love work. So your love yourself candle, your entice candle. But as you're doing that, before you focus on that same honey you've been running down all winter, just like I talked to you about spring, do your intention setting before you start your new love work. Is this still the target? What do I want in a relationship? This should be the part of your work where you're really exploring you. Where are you now in your growth? What kind of partner is going to best match for what you want in your intentions and goal? Always start with you with love work. People always be starting with the other. And I want to be like, start with you, girl. It's about what you want.
I know. I'm one of the things that I'm doing and redoing also, because when I set that fire on my altar last month, my love work is for me. Like, people ask me all the time, am I doing like with your husband? I was like, I've done one spell, which is none of y'all's business, but like Andy helped me on for when the last time I did some work, and it worked. Yeah, and it worked. It really worked. It really worked. But I do my jar working on my love of myself, falling back in love with myself. You know what I use for my jar? And thank goodness I got a brand new one that I get to start over, because I boinked up the last one. So it's time for me to start a new one. I use the jar from Andy's self-love candle. After I burn that candle, then I cleanse it and I use it. I'll even tell y'all some of the things I love to use. I love roses from my rose garden that I planted in honor of my grandmother. I save those rose petals, lots of beautiful pink Himalayan sea salt, damiana, hibiscus. Why so passionate and hot? Because it all starts with me.
There's also pink opal in that candle that's good for that, because that's for self-love and healing. That's a stone in that candle.
But I love that. I love that candle. I love that jar. That's the work, and that's the jar spell that I work all year as long as I can. And that is for love of self, falling back in love with me. Andy has a perfect candle for it to do my meditation and my work on. But when that candle is done, I'm taking it, I'm cleansing it, I'm using it, and it starts all over again. That's where I start. So Andy, thank you for saying that, because rose, jasmine, and honeysuckle are, when it comes to love and feeling that silky, seductive, southern, to be perfectly honest with you, jasmine and honeysuckle and rose are like where I go to in the spring. I'm so glad you said that.
Well, and what I was also going to say is, because you hear these loud ass birds in my yard as we say this, like, look to nature to think about how to begin your love work. Birds don't start their mating process by focusing on the other person. They're singing their loudest song. They're puffing up their loudest chest, right? Like, they're showing their color. And that they are doing in and of themselves to show themselves off attracts others. So love work is about attraction. It's very much like Game of Thrones. Don't start a marriage with a kidnapping. That's what we mean when old heads are saying that. Is like, command work should be a last resort. Attraction work is how you always want love to come to you, because you don't want a trapped, traumatized love in your life. We've all been trapped and traumatized, and we were not good partners. Right? We were not good partners when you were trapped and traumatized. But if you are attracting someone to what is already great in you, Like, and when you see it in nature, it makes you feel like I'm so dumb. Like, that's what blue jays do. They preen themselves. They take care of themselves. Peacocks are working on them. They're working on their feathers, and literally they just go out in the world and they just be. And amazing things come to them. And next thing you know, they have a litter of kids and they're like, why did I do that? Which is where most of us end up, who are peacocks anyway. But that's like, nature already works that way. So, but we as humans have allowed kind of consumerism to you got to work on it. You got to put makeup on it. You got to get the right angle for it. We got to do all this stuff. And then if that don't work, then I'm going to trap him and get him here. And then I'm going to work on him. That's not, none of that, first of all, is necessary. You are built. And my husband says all the time, y'all are built to a tree. He goes, I don't care what you are. And he goes, I'm going to tell you this because there's lots of people, Andy, you and your sister, you could be 300 pounds. You can be big as a 2-ton truck. You could be as skinny as a tree rail. You could be any shade or color. You could be of any persuasion. There is somebody out there that loves it. Go to Kink Talk if you don't believe me. There is.
It's a lid for every pot. I promise y'all. I promise y'all.
Exactly. There is someone out there that loves it. And wouldn't you rather be with the person that is your lid than your pot? You ever tried to cook grits with a too big lid?
Grits ain't going to be good.
You can't cook with a too small lid.
Yeah, exactly. Ain't going to taste
you know
good.
what I mean? And so a lot of times our work around love, or what is frustrating us about love, first of all, is ourselves. But spring and what we're seeing in spring can start giving us, like I always tell people, if you feel like your divination or whatever is just losing you, or you're just not quite sure, look to nature. Nature is just going to back, divination is just an interpretation of what's happening in nature. And that usually will lay the path for you. I've had garden clothes on the last 2 days. My husband has made more passes than me in the last 2 days than he probably has in 6 months. Because it's hot, because I'm outside, I'm half naked, and I'm happy with my hands in the dirt, right? Like, that is the thing that attracts people to you. So, I say that about love work because I know we said we were going to talk about a spring coming of the year, and it's kind of rolling into love work. Because look, we sell Entice candles during February. We all do. We all kind of follow these markers. But us as spiritual people, this is also a part of your transformation too. You'll start to get these little nods like that always didn't quite seem right. Like, I want to tell people, you know why there's always like this undercurrent and backlash around Valentine's Day? Because it feels like a false line in the sand. Like, if we all don't have a boyfriend by February 14th, the game's up. And when you look at nature, that's not even the time you should be looking for a boyfriend. We still in sweatpants. I'm still eating ho-hos. I'm still hibernating
by the fire. I'm not.
Yeah.
If the person doesn't wander by the fire I'm sitting by, I don't know how it's gonna happen because like I'm not moving.
That's why I say now that spring is here, reevaluate. Because that dude that you ran down, I hate to say it, because I didn't know on TikTok too that there was a whole trend with the young people, and I love that the young people are so honest about what they were doing. Because y'all, back in our day, you had to have tact about these kind of things, which you just had to keep it a secret. But girl, they get them a snuggle bunny for the winter. It's usually a big dude that they can snuggle with that'll keep them warm. And then for spring, they go out and they get their hot dude. And look,
queens, young queens, yes ma'am, come through, get what you need.
Is my husband in the yard? Yeah, get your. It was so funny because it's usually like a big teddy bear. So it's so funny. There are these website episodes, everybody hanging out trying to get the last teddy bear before they all go for the season to lay up with. Oh my God, it's so funny. So anyway, check and make sure your teddy bear is still the one, because he may not be the one.
Also, you said lay up with which is a old Southern. Me and Andy were both laying up with our.
No judgment. I done laid up with a few. I gotta be quiet because my husband in the yard.
Me too.
And your husband ought to be grateful that you laid up with a few. That's what made you good at what you got. That's how you catch the husband.
Trying to help y'all.
For y'all fancy ones out there with your legs.
Oh, trying to help y'all.
Girl,
you've given us so many beautiful gems. I can't wait to get my new self-love and my own love jar started. What do you recommend for people for whom this spring is their spiritual awakening? The hoodoo, the witch, the mystic of them is waking up. They feel it. Whatever happened over the winter, they are ready to work. They are ready to get activated, but maybe they don't know how to start. Do you mind sharing with me and folks listening, like what's your focus and how do you recommend our awakening mystics start?
Oh, and that's hard because my awakening happened like in autumn. So it was real easy for like me to ease into it because everything is about slowing down at the end of the year. Because, I know y'all spring witches. Y'all ready to just manifest all types of shit that y'all ain't got no business manifesting because it's an exciting time of the year. So my first caution would be is to, if you are starting your spiritual journey, it is amazing time right now to understand the elements because you've got so many options to actually start deep diving and doing some elemental work. You know, a lot of times in winter, if you a witch living in New York, you know, learning about elements in the winter ain't fun, right? Like water's frozen, things are dead outside. It's just not. I think this is an amazing time that if you're learning about, and when I talk about the four elements, earth, fire, water, air. Did I say all of them? Yes. And spirit. Actually, there's five elements, but spirit is kind of happening while you're deep diving on all the other four. So before you jump to spirit, start with these. Spirit kind of happens all the time. But start looking at your elements. If you're looking at the earth elements and you're really deep diving in your elemental work, no matter what type of nature-based practice you're going into, a huge part of understanding the practice is going to be understanding the elements and a connection to nature. So what better time than to start there? Start going outside. Go on walks. Go on nature walks. Find out the most elemental thing you can do is find out where green spaces are in your community. And I mean green spaces that aren't the dog park where you can take your shoes off and walk around and not get hookworms. As my grandma would say all the time, you thought everything was going to give you hookworms.
Yeah, Grandma hated for us to be barefoot walking around outside. I think it must have been dangerous for her to walk around outside as a child.
Well, we've got antibiotics now. You should be fine.
Okay.
As long as you're not like, what? That's why I say, like, don't go walk around the dog park where there's feces and stuff everywhere. But access green space, right? Or try to create green space around you. If it's still cold and you're hanging out with your house plants or whatever, start to look at how the earth is waking up and to understand the part of the wheel of the year that you're in. Then deep dive in your element. Earth, what is dirt? What is it? How does it sustain life? Air that's around us. You know, if you're playing around with incense, how is the air quality where you live? Do you know the things that you need to know about your air? Lord, Halleck got 15 rules in the air where she lives. In California, I mean, even for her to access air, she's got like 15 things she's got to do in her house just to take care of the air around her, which is amazing for her area. But understand, and when I say understand earth, understand your geography, not just where your local park is. Who are the indigenous people who came from where you are, right? What is their culture? What is their understanding of this land? I love taking my kids to go to museums so they can learn. You know, Texas was actually a part of the ocean. So like a lot of where we are in San Antonio is riverbed. So you can actually dig in a lot of places in San Antonio and found shells and fossils and things of that nature. What is your proximity to the ocean? What is your proximity to water and natural bodies of water, even man-made bodies of water? What is your relationship to water? How do you feel when you get in the swimming pool? Do you have bodies of water that you can access and be a part of now that you're practicing spirituality and a witch? Where are they? What do they look like? What does your body feel like when you're introducing yourselves to these new spaces? How do you like to enjoy them? You know, Halleck is a person, she's allergic to a lot. How she enjoys outside is different for her, and it depends on where you are. Same thing with fire, right? We're going to be outside more. Winter, you know, I start doing a lot more like s'mores and outdoor cooking with things. How you're introducing the fire element is going to change during this season because you got the sun. You are outdoors, right? Like that is a fire element, the sun itself. So start focusing like on the four elements in the beginning of your path to understand those four things and what they are, and even starting to learn correspondences for them if you can't get close to them, right? What are my correspondences for water if I can't get there? Seashells, sand. Do I have, like for me, I spent one spring, we learned about the natural rivers and waterways because I wanted to have a jar of water that was where we live. So like I made it a point to go find the natural river, and I learned about the process of how to purify that water and put it in a jar. Right? For you learning earth, maybe I want to learn how to make a terrarium or at least want to plant a plant. It could be a lot of different things. But I tell you that I think as a beginning witch in spring, there's so many great options to be outside in natural habitat that's where I would focus your connection to nature and understanding the four elements, especially as the world is waking up and people are coming outside. This is where you can actually practice your spirituality outside and commune in nature. So that's probably where I would start, if I was a new witch. It's just being outside, girl, being outside, soak it all up, and to understand what that means and what those different elements mean. You know what I mean? For your
I
practice.
was searching frantically in my new favorite deck for Andy's card, the Magician. In that card, we literally see the magician in this beautiful bower. As we're talking about spring, this is the Tazama African Tarot. Like, look at that beautiful cup, like full of roses and flowers, which to me is so emblematic of our grandma Halicue. But the magician, if you look at the image of the card on his table, is where he gathers the elements, just as Andy was talking about. And she was talking about meditating, going outside. I just wanted to offer this in support of what Andy was saying, because honestly, the magician really is representative of her, but it's also something else you can use to help you anchor and guide. And so I just wanted to offer that. And Andy, I also want to recommend that people start with your roots. Start with your ancestry. Who are your people? And those of us in the ATR community, since we're coming from, like, starts in Yoruba, travels with, our enslaved people, transatlantic slave trade, turns into different things. Now we would, those of us, we would like for you to connect with your ancestors that weren't, that like weren't racist. If you don't know where to start, go to your family, go to your people, ancestry.com, 23andMe or whatever, and start digging into your own culture. Where do your folks come from? I promise you, wherever that search to your ancestry leads you, there is a magical practice. There's folk magic. There are spiritual practices that are yours, that are unique to you and your own DNA. Andy and I hope that we inspire you and a little bit of education, a little bit of inspiration, a lot of entertainment and a lot of laughter. But if you don't know where to start with your own folks. Like, start with, who you are, like where you come from. If you don't know your direct forebears, do a little bit of some of that DNA. Andy, what do you think?
Because let me tell you what you don't want to do. Haliccue's going to tell you about what you do want to do. I'm always going to tell you what you don't want. What you don't want to do is starting from a point, because there is a lot of, and it's funny that we're having these conversations. There's a lot of messaging out there that makes you feel like, oh, if you want to participate in this type of spiritual practice, there is this A, B, C, D, and E thing that you have to do. Those, and there are closed practices. Don't get me wrong. There are closed practices. And as far as I'm concerned, to appreciate and just being respectful of diversity, even outside of closed practices, I think that there are practices that are very culturally tied, right? General example, powwows are ceremonies, right? Some of them may be public, but they're a ceremony. Unless I had some type of genetic or some type of heritage connection with indigenous people, that just may not be where I would first seek to make that connection. And a lot of times we live in places, I'm going to call it Boulder, Colorado, where my sister is, where people feel like that you can kind of shop for spirituality from different cultures. That's the nicest way I know how to say it, Key. I'm trying to keep it Spotify nice.
You're doing very well. Beautiful.
Certain people do it more often than others. I'm gonna try not to call you out, colonizer, but you do.
Yep.
And it's because it's a part of what colonization does, right? It's an extension of, taking things that belong to other people and appropriating it for yourself. You may be drawn to things that are not for you, and you have to acknowledge that, and you have to be okay with that. I am drawn to Little Devil cream cakes. I can't eat I can't. I have a prevalence for diabetes.
You could, but it's not going to be good for you.
It's probably not the greatest.
We could.
You're going to be drawn toward, people tell me all the time, well, I'm a spiritual leader. You're drawn towards lots of things that may not necessarily be drawn for you. To be quite honest with you, there are some people designing things to draw you toward things that you should not be participating in. So when Halicue is saying start with you and start with your ancestors, I'm going to say, apply that with a grain of salt. If you are practicing or connected to a spiritual practice, like, African traditional religions, indigenous, spiritually based type kind of practices, ancestry is a huge part of how you kind of start there, right? Because your lineage is super important. If you're not a part of those practices, starting with your ancestry and your heritage just may be starting with you. Who am I, right? Who am I? Where am I in life now? Where did I come from? Who is my family? How do they understand who they are? right? And so that's an understanding of ancestry, right? And then for others, it might be geographically tied. A lot of our Wiccan practices, our European practices, maybe you may have your own different type kind of identification around your cultural group or your heritage group or your regional group, right? That may dictate a lot of what you believe. And it's a wonderful deep dive into where you came from. Like for me and HALICUE, that's Southern roots. If you're Irish, if you're Welsh, if you're, if you're Jamaican, if you're Caribbean, if that's your background, and really deep diving into those types of things can be great. I think there's a million different ways you can reconnect with where you come from. Just understand that when we say connect with your ancestry, depending on your practice, that's going to be different, right? Now, I will tell you, HALICUE, like just from a mental health standpoint, whoever you reach out to on the spiritual plane, right, you need to take care of yourself. That's part of protection. And, so when HALICUE goes, don't reach out to your racist ancestors, like, yeah, you don't want to reach out to anyone, right, that kind of has, kind of crazy energy. But I just say that because I think sometimes people get confused, like, oh, well, ancestries and talking to your ancestors, that's a closed practice type kind of thing. No, it's not.
Yeah.
There are cultures across the globe that are connected to to ancestor veneration, right? From all over the globe. That's different for different people. And how you connect is different. We have a whole branch of folks that I love to not forget in our practice who may not know who their cultural roots are, or they may be generationally or societally removed from where their cultures are.
Maybe I'll put some images of Andi in her garden. The Dowager Empress is coming to visit. I'll be joining Andi and my mom in Texas on Thursday.
Let me explain, y'all. Y'all coming to my house. Ain't no empresses coming to visit.
Andi's the Empress. Andi's like the Empress will be welcoming you to her home. I can't wait. I love you, Andi. Thank you for this.
We know y'all like to get out of pocket. I am looking forward to y'all coming. I'm super excited.
It's going to be wonderful. And a shout out.
It's Fiesta.
And a shout out. And
you haven't been to Fiesta before, have you?
I'm so excited. And a shout out and kisses to my homegirl.
Our made up holiday that's not Mardi Gras. They're going to get mad at me for saying that in Texas. I don't care.
Yeah, it's going to be wonderful. I can't wait. And I want to give a big shout out to our girl, Ariana Mag, the human design queen, another magical mom. Who really, 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 especially from you, Andi, wanted a Wheel of the Year spring episode. I hope it served. We love y'all. We can't wait to see you next week. Where we're going to start jumping into love work. We've handled prosperity, and spring is a wonderful jumping off point, just like Andi said, to begin your love work now. And
prepare y'all for the mess, y'all.
I know, since y'all want to get into it, we're going to do our best to provide some support, education, and entertainment, and y'all get into it.
I done worked to catch this man. How I get rid of him?
Oh, my God. Okay. That's all right. We're here for y'all. We're going to help you.
It's going to be fun.
We love y'all, and we'll see y'all next week on the Pillars, the Porch, and the Path.
Well, now that you are prepped for a little spring and pre-Beltane fabulousness, I want you to get ready for our next big correspondence, spell, and magical series on love. Now that your road is open, you've got your prosperity spell work on lock, you're ready for spring, naturally, what comes next? Here's a little hint. The 9 of Pentacles, carnelian, jasmine, pink Himalayan sea salt, roses, Damiana, rose quartz, and Queen Elizabeth root. Oh my. Season 4 busted open. Spring has sprung forth, and we're ready to offer up all of the candle magic, spell casting, tarot cards, and non-stop cackles that we have got. And here's a little journal prompt in preparation for next week. When you think about yourself, your life, where you are right now, I want you to ask yourself this question, maybe even journal about it. What does love have to do with it? All right, have fun with that one. And remember, all of our links to all of the candle magic creations at www.tallulah.com and to the tantalizing tarot goodness at my site at www.thegildedabsura.com are waiting for you down there in the show notes. We love staying in touch and in community. Y'all know what's up. It is so vital for all of us intuitive, spiritual pathfinders and mystics. We love hearing from you, and we cannot stop finding new ways to deepen, elevate, and uplift the conversation on the intuitive arts and spiritual exploration. You know we're from the deep and dirty South, and we don't like to stand on a lot of ceremonies, so just know that from this point on, you have an extra special extended honorary family and friends invitation to our magical podcast function. So we're going to need for you to get in where you fit in and participate. And how can you do that? You can email us at pillarsporchpath@gmail.com and tell us what's going on in that magical, mystical mind of yours. Follow us on all social media. All of our handles and links are down there in the show notes. And we are a must follow on Clubhouse, the Wisdom app, Twitter Spaces, and of course, Instagram. All right, you sexy seers, sorceresses, and spellcasters, we will see you next week, same day, same time, on the Pillars, the Porch, and the Path.